yeah, Irish independence, I
So
guess, right?
what do you know about the famine?
Um, really, really nothing. I'm quite happy to admit my ignorance now. um, really not much. It's other than there was a famine, and I think potatoes were the one thing that. Wait, no, I'm not even going to guess. I don't know.
Okay, so there was a famine, and what is a famine?
Famine is when food cannot grow or there is no access to food for a period of time.
Yeah, so a famine is when there's a lack of food for a country or for a population. And in Ireland, it has been known as the Great Potato Famine. And I just did inverted commas for those people who are listening because it definitely wasn't a potato famine. Yes, the potatoes ceased to grow due to blight, blight being a disease that went all over Europe. And yes, potatoes were the main staple food for the native Irish. However, it was also the amount of food that was exported from Ireland during that time. So I and many other people would go as far to say it was an act of attempted genocide by the UK government against the
Mm.
Irish people because there was more than enough food to feed Irish people in Ireland, but it was being exported to England. It was being exported to other parts of the world. Other countries wanted to donate food to Ireland at the time, but the Queen and the British government wouldn't really allow that to happen. They would prevent that from happening. Ireland actually did receive a donation from the Choctaw Nation, the Native Americans, of
Wow.
I can't exactly remember how much it was, but it was just a case that they were sending what they could. So I mean, this was a well-known thing that the food was being taken out of Ireland. And I just have some. My friend actually sent me some messages about it the other day. And in 1845 in Ireland, 3,251,907 quarters of corn were exported from Ireland to Britain. So we
Wow.
produce a lot of corn, but that was exported. The same year, 200,000, 200,000 and 257,257 sheep were exported to Britain. In 1846, 480,000 swine and 186,000 oxen were exported to Britain. A wide variety of commodities left Ireland during 1847, including peas, beans, onions, rabbits, salmon, oysters, herring, lard, honey, tongues, animal skins, rags, shoes, soap, glue, and seed. And almost 4,000 vessels carried food from Ireland to the ports of Bristol, Glasgow, Liverpool, London during 1847, which we call Black 47, because that was the year when the most people died and the
Mm.
most people emigrated. So much so that even today, we still haven't reached pre famine numbers of population.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And so it is an interesting thing that recently Irish Joe Biden, the way he calls himself that, he said that his family left Ireland because of the British. A few years before that, Paul Ryan, a Republican in the US, said his family left because the potato failed. And I think that sums up the way history has been treated, where you have on the one hand Paul Ryan who's like, oh, it's all because potatoes failed. But then you have Joe Biden, who is more realist and has probably actually researched it and is like, wasn't just because potatoes, it was because the food was literally taken from the hands of the Irish people and exported to Britain. So that's a huge one there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So the extent that I knew about it was that, you know, Britain had done some, yeah, pretty bad things to Ireland, and yeah, I guess that was one of them, right? So did that contribute? I guess that must have had a big contributing factor to the independence, which happened a bit later,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So that was in 1846, 1847. I actually went on for about 3 years. And then it was that absolutely did fuel independence. And at the same time, Catholic emancipation was a big factor. Catholic emancipation being that in Ireland, if you were Catholic, you weren't able to own land worth a certain amount. You weren't able to have a horse worth a certain amount of money. You weren't allowed to have a gun. There was all these rules placed against Catholics, basically all the native Irish population, because at that stage, England wasn't Catholic. You know, at that stage, Ireland was Catholic, but Britain wasn't Catholic. And so from 1847 right up to 1916, there would have been some rebellions, but 1916 was the big, gigantic rebellion that really kicked off the last war of independence, the one that finally became successful. And yes, the famine would have been used as almost like propaganda to just remind people why we deserve to have our own country, and why, like, what's also really interesting about the famine and everything else is like, that's what Britain did to its own people. Like, people in Ireland were British at the time, and Britain starved them and took food from them. So Irish people were kind of like, why are we being part of Britain when they don't show us any respect, when we don't have the same rights as other British citizens? And that was a really motivating factor. It's kind of like, for a long time, Ireland only wanted its own parliament in Dublin to control the affairs of Ireland and let the British government control international affairs. That's what was really wanted. And it was in 1801 when the Act of Union happened, which took Ireland's parliament away. So in 1801, Ireland's parliament was dissolved and Irish affairs were controlled from Westminster and London. After that, up until about 1916, there was more of a push to get home rule, where we'd have our own government in Ireland to control Irish affairs. That kept failing. That was like a carrot and the stick. You know, Britain kept promising, oh, you'll get it, you'll get it, you'll get it. And eventually got to the breaking point where home rule wasn't enough and full 100% independence was what we wanted and got.
Okay. That puts it all into perspective then. Yeah, I mean, I kind of selfishly love these kind of episodes because I'm learning so much as well. So it's really interesting. What I probably would say to, maybe we could move on now, but maybe if the listeners do want to kind of learn more about a specific topic, they can, I don't know, come check out your page if you talk about it, or
check
maybe...
out the page.
Yeah.
Sorry, what you're going to say? Or
No, yeah, go ahead, check out the page.
I would say take responsibility for your own learning. Yeah. And I think that's a huge message. And this is no disrespect to you or to anyone else, but there is a severe lack of knowledge of history between our countries, a severe lack of knowledge from the English educational system and the way, I mean, how much do you know about England's colonization of the world and the crimes committed against people around the world time and time again? And it's like, these are the things that people should know about, even in England, in your own country. Every country and every citizen should know the good and the bad of their own history.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I was going to mention that too, that it might come to surprise to many people, but I wasn't taught anything about the British Empire in school. Like throughout my entire school, even like GCSEs, I never did that. So I really don't know much about it, to answer your maybe rhetorical question. So yeah, I'm kind of actively trying to learn more about it these days and some of the horrible things we did in the past. But yeah, it's definitely a good idea to look into it, and I'll be doing that too.